Welcome back to Shat on TV Game of Thrones Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece of the juggernaut HBO series Game of Thrones. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And unfortunately, Roger Roper cannot be with us tonight, but he will join us again later this week. This is our Instacast episode, where we share our quick takes on this week's episode of Game of Thrones. We're recording literally 30 minutes after we watched, so this is the quick takes. Nice, short, and sweet before we go into our deep dive later this week. This week's episode was entitled The Queen's Justice. In this episode, Daenerys holds court, Cercei returns a gift, and Jaime learns from his mistakes. So, Big D, what did you think of this episode?
Really enjoyable. It's nice to see that the show can still catch me off guard and surprise me, still pull on the emotional heartstrings. And every time you think that Cersei's down for the count, she's got a way to stand back up. She's quite resilient. All in all, I thought it was a strong episode. What about you?
I felt like it, exactly what you said. It lulled us into the sense of security with this opening scene with Jon Snow and Tyrion chumming around, and you got like a little hints of romance between Jon Snow and Daenerys, and you're like, oh, like this show looks like it's getting kind of soft, and then boom, they hit you with the twist.
We've now seen, this is season 7. You start to feel the way the episode's going. There was parts that I felt were a bit heavy-handed. I knew the kiss of death was coming, and I was like, to my wife, I said, do you see this coming as well? And she's like, yeah, I see it. So the point that we're going to discuss, I think, first up here with the Lannisters, the way they laid the scenes out and the way they used Tyrion's narration, I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, so to break this down, we're sitting there, we talked in previous episodes, we were so focused on Daenerys' plan, Tyrion's plan. What are they going to do from Dragonstone? How are they going to launch this attack? And one thing we didn't notice is that, Daenerys has these advisors, she has dragons, she has fierce warriors. What she doesn't really have is a tested general that's there at Dragonstone on her side, and this proves costly. They're so confident in their plans, they've not met the kind of resistance that the Lannisters can put up. And so, we see this playing out. So a brief recap of what happens here, if you kind of miss the machinations there and the maneuvering, is the Iron Bank comes to King's Landing. They say to the Lannisters, hey, you owe us a lot of money. Your coffers are empty. Your vaults are empty. And Cercei says, give us a fortnight and you'll be paid in full. Lannisters always pay their debts. And we're going, how the hell is she planning on doing that? Well, quite obviously, while Casterly Rock is being attacked, the Lannisters are going in and they've taken Highgarden from the Tyrells, and with it, all the money they've got.
So, I mentioned the voiceover, and it's masterful the way they lay the scene out. Tyrion is narrating what he believes that Cercei and Jaime will predict they will do, a full frontal assault on Casterly Rock, and the heavy casualties the Unsullies are taking, and that it was almost inevitable to fail. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we're seeing what worst case scenario is. The Unsullied, obviously, this is going to be some, overwhelming victory for them. They have the element of surprise going through the sewers. And when they get to Casterly Rock and Grey Worm looks out at the fleet, and you can see Euron has surprisingly attacked the remaining ships that Daenerys has, and they're all ablaze, and the Unsullied are now trapped in a half-empty castle with no supplies. I was like, oh shit, I did not see that coming.
Absolutely. We're talking about generational shifts, and they're very heavy-handed on this. The child not paying for the sins of the father. Another take on that, though, is the shedding of skins. In these generational shifts, Jaime comes out and says that, Casterly Rock, we can let that go for a while. Highgarden is what we want, right? It's a shedding of the old skin, a reimagining of what you can be and where power lies, and taking it over. And I loved that beautiful overture they played as he was strolling through Highgarden, of the Rains of Castamere playing as Highgarden fell. It shows that there has been a titanic shift in power in Westeros.
And I think it also shows that our fears were unfounded, that with the amount of material they need to cover in such few episodes, we all were afraid that it was just going to be balls to the wall too fast and that they couldn't do it all effectively. But economy of scene, we didn't need to see the fighting. We didn't need to see the Lannisters fighting the Tyrells, who are wealthy. They're not really known for their fighting skill. We didn't need to see that. You encompassed an entire battle with Jaime's 30-second walk with the Reigns of Castamere to go see Lady Olenna. Beautiful in 30 seconds. The attack on Casterly Rock, again, really economical, and I appreciate it. I'm less concerned now that they're going to be forced to speed through the material, and they can still do it in a way that's economical and also effective emotionally and storytelling.
One of the other wonderful things that we saw from this attack on Highgarden was Olenna, even in her death or presumed death, she's still that great character. One final scene with her, just even mocking him as she knows that she's going to die. You know, he says there are always lessons and failures. And she said, yes, you must be very wise by now. And then calls him, you poor fool, calling out his love for Cercei and saying that she will cross him at some point, that he has gone off the deep end and there's no, saving him, which we'll get to later in this Instacast. But one other thing that kind of was rolling through my head is that confession that she killed Joffrey. Now, we know that they'd kind of pinned that on Tyrion, and they thought that Tyrion was responsible for that. Now this confession, I feel like it's going to create this strange dynamic between the rest of the Lannisters and Tyrion, and possibly a window for reconciliation, or at least a bit of remorse for calling out their brother in a way that, I mean, sure, he killed Tywin, but he's not the monster that they maybe thought he was.
You have to remember that Jaime had never turned on Tyrion. Even after Oberyn loses the trial by combat and they're going to execute Tyrion, Jaime allows him to escape. So Jaime will believe it. I don't know that Cercei will ever believe it or forgive him. There will be no reconciliation. But at least now Jaime knows that he was correct to trust his brother, and the reconciliation between them might bode not too well for Cercei.
Absolutely. You've got Olenna with these prophetic words. You've got now his knowledge that he was right about Tyrion. Maybe Cercei doesn't have the degree of mercy that's necessary. So it remains to be seen what happens there, but it puts an interesting spin on that relationship between brothers. But getting back to Tyrion, we now know that, his life was spared, and we thought that he was making good. That his life being spared changed the history of Westeros. And now we're seeing maybe he's not the great leader we thought he was.
Well, everyone always assumes that Tyrion's the smartest guy in the room, and he uses his intellect. But you mentioned Blackwater. Yeah, he was almost single-handedly responsible for masterminding the defeat of Stannis with the wildfire, when they laid siege to King's Landing. But since then, I don't know that his track record deserves being Hand of the Queen.
No, I mean, you look at, again, if you look back on his history, you've got a failed treaty to end slavery in Meereen. It was a very bold move on his part to act on behalf of the Queen when she wasn't home, and I think that really backfired.
Yeah, it backfired definitely, because not only did the slavers and the masters end up laying siege to Meereen, but it also betrayed Missandei and Grey Worm that they were sitting together and invited the slavers back. When you were dealing with people who, you look at poor Grey Worm and Missandei, it was a betrayal of their closest allies. So I don't know that he has a finger on the pulse of what's going on. And since then, you look, he's the one who recommended that they stop at Dragonstone instead of immediately attacking King's Landing. If they had just sat down on Dragonstone and gone for King's Landing, yeah, they would have killed tens of thousands of innocent people, but she'd be sitting on the Iron Throne.
Yeah, in addition, he says when he's talking to Jon Snow on the cliffs there of Dragonstone, he says that he's gone there to kind of brood over the loss of the ships as well, that he didn't foresee Euron attacking those ships, which, you would think if the ships are critical to your survival or to your plan working out, bringing those forces from Dorne, why on earth wouldn't you protect them with, as now we see Daenerys saying, with dragons at the very least?
Yeah, later on in the episode, we hear Littlefinger describing his method for strategic planning, and it borders on madness, and I think we'll touch it tomorrow. But he said everything is happening in real time, and every possibility and combination is happening. And if you think of them all, you'll never be surprised or unprepared. Tyrion's the complete opposite. This is something he should have thought. You're right. How do you not foresee, hey, Euron is out there, maybe they're going to cross paths. Is it worth the risk to our fleet and the limited army that we have now to risk this?
And you've got a predator like Euron out on the seas, and so it bites him in the ass twice. Because then when the Unsullied land at Casterly Rock, guess who's there to attack him again? Euron. knocking out their ships. They're stranded. Again, you can pin that right back to Tyrion. This is poor planning. Now, I mean, obviously, we were all gung-ho about this an episode ago, so we can't say that, he's an idiot, but rather he may not have the chops that other military leaders do.
Yeah, and granted, all of her forces are now in Westeros on the main continent, so you don't need the ships to cross the Narrow Sea. But you've now got the Unsullied trapped to the north, and they're going to have to traverse over the land. You can't get anywhere quickly, so it hasn't completely crippled her. But for Tyrion to have these many swings and misses, one right after another, that Tyrion convinces her to let Jon come to her castle into the throne room, not bend a knee, and then also ask to help fight an unforeseen imaginary dead that she can't even conceive of. Oh, yeah, and also I want to use your troops that are left here to mine dragon glass from under your castle. Why is she even listening to him?
Dude, it felt like he was playing the role of Lumiere and Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast or Sebastian from The Little Mermaid. I expected him to full on burst in to kiss the girl when he's sitting there trying to play like matchmaker in a pretty serious situation. It was a little unsettling, and that kind of leads to that. When Jon Snow and Sir Davos arrived at Dragonstone, parts of this scene felt off to me, and I sat back and really tried to jot down notes as to why. It starts out with Davos and Missandei. He asks her where she's from. Then he says that he hears that where she's from is all butterflies and sunshine and beautiful down there. I couldn't tell if he was hitting on her, if he was just trying to pull information. It felt really weird. Is he just a super nice guy? And then he says this place has changed since the last time he was there. Is he saying it's more pleasant now that there's pretty girls around? This whole scene felt weird to me.
Hold on. They're being greeted at the beach relatively peacefully. The last time he was there, he was helping Gendry escape from being burned. They were holding mass bonfires and burning believers for the Lord of Light. Yeah, it was a dark time at Dragonstone. So yes, now there's pretty girls greeting you at the beach. The place definitely has changed.
So then we get Jon and Tyrion strolling around all chummy. I'm thinking one of two ways this goes. One is that, they're just beating us over the head with the fact that Jon and Tyrion are real cool with each other. And if so, we get it. Or is something meant to feel a bit off? I found often with Game of Thrones, if something in the pit of my stomach is saying something's not right here, that gut feeling is usually right, which is a testament to, again, how well this show is put together.
No, I think the importance of that scene, their previous interaction was the road north when Tyrion accompanied him to the wall. And at that point, Tyrion was a lord. Jon was a bastard going to the wall to essentially do manual labor in anonymity for the rest of his life. So Tyrion had the upper hand. Tyrion was the one who commanded the conversation. Jon looked up to him. So when he first walks up and he meets him, he calls him the dwarf of Casterly Rock. Jon Snow bastard would have never talked to Tyrion that way, so he needed to balance the playing field. But talking about bad advisors, one valuable advisor, without Sir Davos, where is Jon Snow? Where would Stannis have been? If I'm having any small council, if I'm a leader in Westeros, I want Davos as my head of communication.
Yeah, he's got he's kind of got that folksy fireside chat thing going there. He introduces himself in a very humble way, and that led to me to really think about that. Daenerys and Jon Snow being two sides of the same coin. There, you've got this stark contrast, no pun intended. Dany's got her grandiose titles as they enter, and Sir Davos says, "This is Jon Snow." And then he kind of adds a little bit, he's the king of the north. But right after that, you see that Daenerys and Jon Snow share an almost identical philosophy on fealty and also on sins of the father. They've spoken almost identical words from opposite sides of Westeros. This entire scene, once they got into the throne room, absolutely delicious. Dany really came through as a balanced ruler. But one thing that we see there is that, that really obvious slip was that Jon doesn't want people to know he's dead. And this answers a question that we had from last episode, which will he use that fact as proof? Why doesn't he just say, hey, I died and came back to life. You should follow me. Well, clearly he doesn't want people to know what he went through.
Well, hold on. He's already having a hard enough time having people believe that the dead are rising and that the White Walkers are a threat on the other side of the wall. If he starts throwing in there, oh yeah, and I was killed and I was resurrected, you're going to stretch people's suspension of disbelief to the point that they're just going to laugh you off and explain it as madness. So he needs to keep at least some of what's going on a secret. If he starts throwing in, giant snow spiders and all kinds of other things that people don't believe in, no one's going to take him seriously.
Yeah, and it is interesting to think of the fact that she's got dragons, and no one would believe her if they hadn't seen them. Likewise, he's talking about the White Walkers. If he had White Walkers flying around his head, they'd probably be like, oh, okay, we believe you too. Tyrion says a very important thing, though. Again, drawing those parallels, he says she protects people from monsters just as you do. But is there a difference there where the monsters are on her side in that sense? We talk about the monstrosity of slavery, but let's not forget that these dragons have killed innocent people. They're not just kindly foot soldiers in a war. These are creatures of immense power that she doesn't have complete control over.
I think, yeah, it's true. But you could say that about Jon as well. Jon has done things that were considered monstrous to his black brothers. Letting the wildings through, who had slaughtered and killed Ollie's family, and he was breaking bread with the enemy. They both have an image of each other based in misconception. Jon sees Daenerys as a spoiled rich kid who feels entitled. She sees Jon as kind of this dumb, brooding northern brute. And at their core, what they're working their way down is to see that they've both risen from nothing to where they are now, and that mutual respect is what everything going forward will be based on. Because at this point, Daenerys needs allies, and Jon is probably the best that she can get.
And you got to kiss the girl. Telling you, man. Anyway, so the other thing we see, though, is, speaking of brooding and standing on high towers, you got Melisandre up there doing her thing, and she meets up with Varys, which I think is, again, a very powerful scene. She reveals a couple things in this I wanted to touch on really quickly. One, she's headed to Volantis. Recap of that place. It's one of the free cities that launched the attack on Meereen after the slaves were freed. It also has a huge population of slaves itself and a large population that believes in the Lord of Light. So it began as a colony of Valyria, so we're talking, in a rather ancient place, but she's going there presumably for one, two, or both reasons, which is the slave population, the Lord of Light belief, or maybe a combination of the two.
Yeah, but she admits that she's done horrible, terrible things. I don't know why, though, Varys is taking this opportunity in a real thinly veiled threat. Hey, you better get out of here. Why is he so threatened by her when she only seems to be having Daenerys' best interest at hand?
I think Varys is wise, and he's seeing right there before his eyes that there are two people who just came from the north, and she wants nothing to do with them. The fact that she wants nothing to do with them means, and that she seems to be evading, to me would stir some misgivings, and Varys is not a stupid guy. Interesting, though, he also sees some of himself in her. He says, give us common folk one taste of power. We're like the lion who tasted man. Nothing is ever so sweet again. So he's saying right there that he knows that you can get drunk on power when you're rubbing elbows with the vaulted bloodlines. And she retorts that they're both that she will return, regardless of what he has to say. She has to die in this strange country, just like him.
Yeah, but she reminds him quickly, we are far from common folk now. Even though Varys talks about his humble roots, he's further from it right now than Melisandre is. Melisandre remembers where she was and now knows she's not. Varys still thinks he is that common man. So I'm not sure who I'm siding with here, but Varys is seeming a bit shady.
Lest we be accused of forgetting about stuff that's going on the high seas and in King's Landing, let's talk really quickly about Euron delivering Yara and the Sands to Cercei. I thought it was a good scene. I'm a little tired of these extras throwing fruit at people. It's a little weird, and just I wonder how you get that gig of yelling, boo! I felt it was very Princess Bride. But, we see this great return. Euron, foul-mouthed, swashbuckling, comes in there, gets oddly close to the throne, and I'm wondering why. But then again, we saw the Dothraki let Jon get really close to Dany, too, so I guess security is just not a priority here in Westeros and Dragonstone. Euron, we see, is placed in charge of the Navy. Jaime gets the army, and all seems to go well. And I was really bracing myself for some serious brutality, and we didn't quite get it.
So tomorrow I really want to talk about this scene and the games that Euron is playing with Cercei and Jaime on the side and the power play that's going on right now for her affection. But You said that there was no terror, no horror. Alaria, we've seen some horrible things in this series. Could there be anything worse than the fate that she's been sentenced to? Having to sit there and watch her daughter slowly die?
Absolutely. This is crap. So Cersei's plan to execute Tyene leaves too big a window open. You could almost feel them escaping. Maybe Cersei doesn't even kill her at all. Like maybe it's just a mind game. She's getting in her head. I feel like the show has lost its nerve in a sense. If this were season 1, we'd see. No. When she says, "Oh, her pretty brown eyes and her pretty lips," I'm expecting eyes to get plucked out of their sockets, lips to get cut off. I feel like they're trying to make Cersei a more sympathetic character. She's talking about the pain that was caused to her, how she nursed the child herself, and how she wants, this very poetic, poisonous death. All along, I felt that she's not as evil as the men around her, and I feel like the show is really trying to pull us in that direction. But come on, now we've seen before. We saw we got the mountain there, something could happen there. You got Cersei there; they're tied up, and all she's gonna do is, you're gonna watch her die from poison. Come on.
Okay, you obviously didn't pay attention. You're like Raj this episode. Jaime mentions all the ways that Cersei proposed killing Lady Olenna. Flaying her, hanging her from, doing the Walk of Atonement. They were all brutal ways to kill her. Then she mentions, well, maybe, we could kill you the way that Sir Gregor here killed your lover. Let's pop your skull. I've heard it in my sleep. She is not a kind woman. And I don't expect you to understand this. As a father, the thought of having to sit there and watch my daughter in front of me chained up, helpless, and die, the poison is a certainty. She will die. There is no way for her to save her. It would be much more merciful if they just cut her head off. To sit and watch your loved one, your child, die in front of you slowly, there's nothing worse she could have done other than maybe having, Sir Gregor rape her while she's slowly dying. But other than that,
that's exactly what I'm saying. You get a Ramsay Bolton down in the hood, like he's going to be cutting her up. Like there's all sorts of the horrible things you could do. And again, with Lady Olenna, same thing. It's like, well, okay, you're going to die off camera. And I feel like we're watching the show. I don't know what's going on here. Do they not want to freak this huge audience out now? Because to me, I'm sorry, it was far too merciful. We saw the way Myrcella died from the poison. It wasn't the most horrible. It wasn't nearly as bad as Joffrey's death. And on top of that, you've got essentially they're saying, it could be days, it could be weeks or whatever. I feel like I'm watching a James Bond movie, or worse yet, an Austin Powers movie, where they're like, well, I'm just gonna assume you're gonna die now, and I'm gonna walk away. So hopefully nobody rescues you.
No, the only thing worse than an ass kicking is the anticipation of a good ass kicking. So she is going to sit there every moment suffering. That death is prolonged and slow, and it will last her longer. So a merciful death would have been something instant and painful. This is the worst way you could have gone, and it's so subtle. I take it as Cersei is becoming refined in her methods.
All right, we're gonna do a bet here. All right, let's see how we do this. All right.
Oh, if Braun comes in and saves them, fucking all bets are off. No way. I'm jumping out the window too. I'll get on there with you. If that shit happens, I'll lose my mind.
All right.
She has to die.
All right. You mentioned Jaime, Euron in the throne room. What's your take on what's happening to Jaime psychologically in this episode, and how does it affect him going forward?
Jaime has been the only one who's ever had Cersei's back. He seems to have forgiven her for abandoning Tommen and letting him die. But this, to me, was the breaking point. Euron emasculating Jaime, openly discussing the fact that he knows he's been sleeping with his sister, asking for advice if she likes a finger in the bum. And instead of Cersei rebuking it, she says, you will get exactly what you want after the war is won. She doesn't care about Jaime, and Jaime in that moment seemed small for the first time. The Kingslayer, who we've always thought was one of the greatest warriors, the greatest swordsman, he now looks like a little damaged boy. She's finally broken him. And Lady Olenna breaks him later. He's had a masterful victory. Where the Lannisters seem like they're on their last leg. He's flipped the table. He's gotten the gold to pay off the Iron Bank. He's gotten vengeance now on the Tyrells. And she emasculates him in that last moment, saying, I killed your son for you to stand there. Make sure you tell Cersei. He's a broken man, and I think we're going to see now with the realization that his brother really was innocent, that possibly he's been backing the wrong sibling, and we can finally see that fracture between Jaime and Cercei.
And I think it speaks volumes, too, that he walks away from Lady Olenna. He doesn't thrust a knife into her chest. He doesn't, kick her out a window or, smack her in the face. He storms out of the room. God, I hope that doesn't leave another window open for somebody surviving. I just want to see somebody get stabbed. Fuck.
I think there's plenty of stabbings coming.
All right. Anyway, so shifting from a broken man to a creepy man, I was a little creeped out by Bran's entire scene in the Godswoods. I'm glad he made it to Winterfell. That scene was beautiful. The reunion between Sansa and Bran. Again, not a performance in the character of Sansa that I've been over the span of the show that I've been really overwhelmed with. But this was some fine acting, and I felt that it felt very genuine. But Bran is doing a great job of showing that he has become something other than man. He has embraced this three-eyed raven persona.
I think he's channeled his inner David Blaine. It was that very creepy, very understated. I can understand what they're going for. Yes, he's seen a lot. He's been through a lot. But that human element of him wasn't gone a few episodes ago. He should have shown, he was devastated by Hodor's death. He should still have that love for his sister. But I am glad at one thing. Sansa looks at him like, what are you talking about? Three-eyed raven, you've seen everything, but not what are you talking about? And he, in one statement, you looked beautiful on that day, referencing her wedding night to Ramsay, proved to her that his powers were real and explained everything. Again, economy of scene in 15 seconds. She doesn't question. She knows what he is saying is valid, is real.
Yeah, and that was a heavy scene. I almost felt like the screen was shooting away from me in this just, again, two characters in the Godswoods, very muted scene, but it was very powerful. And like you said, in a very brief moment, they were able to express so much. Still creepy. I almost wanted to call Raj up just to hear him squeal about it because for a brother to have a astral projection vision of his sister's wedding night and saying that it was beautiful, it was just a little unnerving, and clearly Sansa is rocked by it.
Yeah, unfortunately, he mentions he's only seen bits and pieces and fragments, so he only has a limited number of memories to pull from, and that one happens to be one of the most painful memories in Sansa's life. But we hypothesized in, I think it was the small council on Thursday, that Bran could end up being the cause of some of the past events that we've seen from the King's Madness. Bran's statement that where he's very disconnected and says, I need to learn to see better, to me was heavy-handed, and it was a clear telling that in the future, he is going to be focused not on his loved ones, family, what's going on, but on refining his ability to go back, and he will have a hand in future or past events.
I'm glad you brought that up because we've always assumed in all these theories, particularly your theory on Bran, it was the idea that he fucked up, that something was done by accident, and that's what created catastrophe, whether it be the Mad King, whether it be the Night's King. We've talked about that, but really what we're seeing here is that he may be just changing into something gradually.
Yep.
Something that is not quite a hero, not quite a Stark, not quite, and we see that again. Arya, is she still a Stark? We don't know. Jon Snow, is he still a Stark? We don't know. Again, now we're looking at Bran. Is he still a Stark? Who is a Stark? I mean, it really brings to question whether what is your bloodline or your, the events that occur in life. What defines you as a member of a clan?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this is almost a full cast. I can usually judge an episode by how many notes and thoughts I have, and I have enough here for a full cast. So that tells me when I go back on second watch, I'm going to love it. But just to close out here, otherwise, it's already 11:45 here in the East. But a couple other things that I think we want to touch on tomorrow would be, Jon's statement as the dragons fly by, but I'm not a Stark, I think is telling. Dany's overconfidence. in mentioning that she should just go out with the 3 dragons and go after Euron's fleet. And she says, I have dragons. What could they do? So that overconfidence is clearly foreshadowing something bad happening. I also want to talk about Sansa's leadership that we've heard command suits her, and I think it did. Littlefinger's way of thinking, strategic thinking, or is it madness? And then Cersei's negotiating skills. Is she refining? Is she becoming better? Or is it more along your lines that she's becoming softer and weaker? I think there's enough here to do a full cast, but those are just some of my thoughts for tomorrow.
I think it's going to make for a great episode. Also, we didn't forget about what's going on with Jorah and Sam. We didn't forget about the Iron Fleet and Theon. Again, we've got lots to talk about in the deep dive, but we got to wrap this thing up, keep it quick, and get it out for everybody for Monday morning's commute. So anyway, I think that's about it, unless you got anything else, Big D?
No, but that scene with Jorah and Sam, it made me want to give you a hug.
Am I Sam or Jorah in this case?
It doesn't matter.
Thanks. Well, he definitely healed quickly, so that was nice to see.
Did. Yeah, he didn't scab up at all. I want to know what that ointment was.
That's pretty good. This is actually the entire show was about the founding or the invention of Neosporin.
But remember, it's what healed him was the climate, was the bed rest and the climate.
So that concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV, Game of Thrones edition. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. Facebook, search for Shat on TV podcasts. The website is shatontv.com. If we said anything that causes you to say, actually, and correct us, or if you just got some insights that you'd like to share, be sure to send them to it, hosts at shatontv.com. We would love to have your insights before we record the deep dive, maybe put us on the right track, get our noses to the ground. We are everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. We've had a surge of them recently, and thank you so much for writing those. Also, you can check out our store on the website for cool Shat on TV merchandise that helps keep the lights on. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Roger Roper, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us Tuesday for our 3rd Game of Thrones deep dive. So thanks a lot for listening, and remember to always knock twice before joining us on the throne.